Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Pens Iceberg. I'm your host, Casey Stamp, as always, alongside my trusty partners, Luke Courtwright and Jason Kaczynski. Luke, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Always great after a Penguins win.
Absolutely. Always great to do the show after a victory, and Jason Kaczynski joins us. Jason, always a pleasure to have you on the show. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. I was thinking after the game that if the Penguins were ever on Tosh.0, tonight's game would have to be their web redemption after the debacle Sunday in Buffalo.
Absolutely, and certainly an improvement over the game in Buffalo that we saw on Hockey Day in America. And we have got a great show for you guys this week. First off, always game analysis of the Pittsburgh Penguins and the New York Rangers live from the Consol Energy Center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then, of course, we're going to discuss the backup goalie situation. Brent Johnson, Brad Thiessen, perhaps a move at the trade deadline. We're going to discuss going forward who's going to be relieving Marc-Andre Fleury. The Penguins' chance for home ice in the playoffs, another topic for us, who could possibly win the division and who could take that 4 spot in the Eastern Conference. And then we'll finish off, as always, with game prediction. So don't go anywhere, stick around. We've got a great show for you guys tonight. Welcome back. Tonight, a game at the Consol Energy Center as the Pens took on the New York Rangers, who sit atop the Eastern Conference. And the Pens were dominant right from the opening puck drop in terms of puck possession and offensive pressure. At one point, they had a shift where they spent 2.5 to 3 full minutes in the Rangers zone, completed 2 offensive zone line changes. And Jason, we'll begin with you here. Was it just a matter of the Penguins outworking the Rangers, or was it the Rangers playing poorly? Which do you think it was, or perhaps was it a mix of both?
I think it was a little bit mix of both after a while. I'm going to lean toward the Penguins working pretty hard. Like we said at the top of the show, the game in Buffalo on Sunday left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. I think, the Pens, when the puck dropped tonight, you could tell they wanted it. And, this was a division game and a chance for them to redeem themselves a little bit. The other thing was, the top line forwards, Malkin, Kunitz, and Neal are just amazing at getting the puck off the board. Evgeny Malkin's just mesmerizing sometimes to watch. I mean, every time he goes in to get a puck, he comes out with it. And I think, after it happened a couple of times, the Rangers defenders were getting pretty tired and maybe just trying to conserve a little bit of energy, and they end up icing the puck and had to take a timeout. But the Pens were on their game tonight. They wanted to play 200 feet away from their own net, and they knew what they wanted to do, and they did it.
Yeah, I would agree. It was a little bit of both. I don't think the Rangers were where they wanted to be, and honestly, if they're on top of the Eastern Conference, this wasn't their game. But for this particular shift, anyway, it was a little bit of work, a little bit of skill, and just a ton of movement. You look at this shift and this entire game, really. And it exemplified really what the Penguins are all about. You saw the D pinching all over the place. Chris Letang in particular, I feel like he spent more time deep in the offensive zone than he really did at the blue line even. And you had the forwards being equally as responsible, covering up at the points. And then we had moments where we saw even someone like Derek England breaking in for a handful of rushes. So really activating the D. It's one of those cases where when this team has its swagger, you really can't stop them. That top line is really clicking on all cylinders, and we're getting that kind of trickle-down effect right now, especially after that game in Buffalo. They really wanted to get to their game early. And on this shift, the Rangers did have a couple of chances to clear, but the Penguins did a really great job of holding it in. And I'm going to point to one guy in particular. Shout out to Paul Martin. He's definitely caught a ton of flack this season, but this might have been his best effort. I don't know how much that's saying, but for his $5 million salary, he lived up to it tonight anyway. Hopefully this is where we can look back and say this is where Paul Martin turned his game around.
And one of the things, one of the guys especially pumped up for this game, I think, was Chris Letang. And he obviously was very disappointed in the minus performance that he had in Buffalo. Hockey Day in America has not been kind to the Penguins over the last 2 years as they dropped, obviously, the game to the Buffalo Sabres on Sunday. And then last year, I believe it was the Chicago Blackhawks topping the Pittsburgh Penguins in the shootout. But back to this game, no scoring in the first somehow as Lundqvist played very well, not only in the opening 20 minutes, but throughout the entire game, really. And in the second, the Pens' domination finally pays off as on a line change, Evgeny Malkin was able to get in behind the New York Rangers defense and just torch Henrik Lundqvist for the second time this season on a backhand to make it 1-0. And then later in the period, the Penguins would get a power play and Steve Sullivan would score with the slap shot. Obviously, we saw Cook doing a very good job in front of the net. Guys, a bit late perhaps to be addressing the topic, but Steve Sullivan on the point on the power play. Throughout the first portion of the year, we saw so many different point men, going back to obviously Chris Letang always on the point, and Matt Niskanen. We saw James Neal there for short stints. We saw Paul Martin there. How does Steve Sullivan rank up to all the different types of point men we had this year, and is he somebody that we're going to see on the point going forward, maybe even past this year if he does stick with the Penguins?
Well, due to his age, I'm not sure how much they're willing to tie up with Steve Sullivan. Because I think he's 36. Not completely sure there, but I know a lot of people are split on Steve Sullivan. They might have expected him to have more of a scoring role directly anyway, supporting someone like a Malkin or a healthy Crosby if we got that far. But honestly, I've loved him for $1.5 million for 1 year. I think this was a great flyer to take, especially for his work on the point on the power play. You look seasons past, even since the lockout really, and this Penguins power play has always been overly stationary. And when you look at the amount of skill and mobility that they have, there's really no reason for that. All that standing around, settling for one-timers at the point, that's not their strengths as a team. Sure, letting Malkin sit back and just let him rip for 2 minutes, that might sound good, but that's not what this team is about. So you've got Sullivan out there. He can float down the left half wall. Malkin can rotate up to the point in the event that he does want to sit back and take those one-timers. But Sullivan's mobility lets Letang kind of roam around. I just really think Sullivan's a great fit for this team now anyway on the power play. He's another one of those veteran types that the Penguins can learn from, not necessarily just for this season, but for the next decade, really.
My only knock against Sullivan on the point, or at least on the power play earlier in the year, was the fact that he would always look to pass first and was never really looking for his own shot, even when it was wide open, and he's corrected that. I like him at the point because he's a mobile guy, and he's a little guy too. If the puck gets deep in the zone behind the net and moves up the half wall, defenders kind of let him go. So he's not the first option on the power play, so defenders might forget about him. And his goal tonight he was on the blue line when he shot it. So as Luke said, he definitely floats around in the zone and is a great passer. The other thing is he's been the needed piece, I think, the past couple of years as far as offensive zone entry in the power play. The Pens have kind of struggled with that the last couple of years, and the last 6 or 7 games on home ice, they've been really good. I think they're on 33% on the power play. They moved up to number 6 overall in the league, and he's for $1.5 million, and for the other thing too is he hasn't missed a game this season, and for his injury history, having missed so much time the last couple of years with back injuries and surgeries and possibly never playing again, it's a good story, and the guys like playing with him, and he likes playing with the group that's in Pittsburgh right now.
Jason, and that's ironic because I was just about to touch on that. A lot of people going into the season expected Steve Sullivan to be healthy, maybe 32 anywhere between 32 and 40 games. Turns out he's the only player or one of the only players on the team, I should say, that hasn't missed a game. A lot of other players, Malkin missed a few games at the start of the year. Certainly Sid's still out. Stahl missed a couple of games. You've got Kennedy missing games, and a lot of man games lost for the Penguins. Sullivan, one of the ones who stayed healthy, despite what people may have thought coming into the season. And the Penguins, on Steve Sullivan's goal, get the insurance goal that they needed. And in the third, no scoring. Pens let off a bit defensively at the end of the game, but ultimately Marc-Andre Fleury was able to come up with the timely saves and shut the door to tie Tom Barrasso for the all-time lead in shutouts for Penguin goaltenders, and he is our Pens Iceberg player of the game. So the gap narrows. The Flyers beat the Jets in overtime. What do you see being the two teams, Jason, we'll begin with you here, to fight for the division as towards the end of the year? Will it be the Rangers and the Flyers? Will it be the Penguins and the Rangers? Will it be the Penguins and the Flyers? What two teams in our division do you think will be fighting it out towards the end of the year?
Well, that's a good question. And for me, I think the jury is still really out on the Rangers. I know they're the top team in the East, and but I'm just uncertain. They don't score enough goals for me to possibly keep up their lead, but they have, I think, a 7-point lead on New Jersey and Philly with three less games played. So I'm sorry, with one less game played. Pittsburgh, has played the most games, and they're a point behind. The Penguins could make a trade acquisition over the deadline here that might not cost them anything, and they could gain a certain former MVP and scoring leader in Sidney Crosby. And having a healthy Sid added to the way the Penguins are playing right now would, I think, really vault them toward the top of the division. I'm not saying that they're going to overtake the Rangers, but and Lundqvist has been pretty lights out for New York. Marty Bruder's a question mark in my mind at 40. He's been great lately, but can he hold it up for the last quarter of the season here? And then Philadelphia has just too many questions for who's between the pipes and what they can do. So I like the Rangers probably to win the division, and Pittsburgh taking the 2 spot.
I definitely agree with Jason. I think it's going to be really hard for anyone to catch the Rangers. I'm also not completely sold on them either. But you look at the numbers, and 7 or 8 points lead that they have on some of these Atlantic teams, and they have all the tiebreakers too at this point. So that's a pretty nice cushion for them. And you look for reasons that they might fall apart, but there really aren't any with the way Lundqvist is playing, and they're relatively healthy, no really huge injuries to deal with, so it's hard to dig up anything. And actually, as of after tonight's game, the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference are all from the Atlantic Division, so I think that really speaks to the strength of the division. Just looking at the schedule until the end of the year, the Penguins have 3 games against the Flyers, 2 against the Devils, and 2 against the Rangers. So there's definitely an opportunity to make some of those games up, but these teams are just going to beat the holy bejesus out of each other coming down the stretch, and it's really going to be a dogfight for that number 4 seed, let alone the number 1 seed, if anybody can make up that space. But even you want to look worst case scenario here, even the number 6 seed in the East would not be terrible, because looking at the way the Southeast Division has gone, looking at point totals and everything, matching up against the Caps or the Panthers or even the Jets, they've played some more games here, but they're right in the middle of it too. That wouldn't be terrible. Washington is certainly quite the enigma in the Eastern Conference, but they just haven't had their game together this year. So even that might be a better matchup than getting home ice for a first-round series against a team like the Flyers, who are going to bring the physical aspect of the game more than any team not named the Bruins. So there's definitely pros and cons to everything. It's going to be really tough to catch up to the Rangers, but the Pens certainly have the talent to scrape and claw their way back up those standings.
And certainly we're going to get a little more into matchups later in the show. But one of the things that I've observed with the New York Rangers, and this is just one guy's opinion here, but they're a great team. They've got a lot of talented forwards. When you look at Marian Gaborik, and certainly the addition of Brad Richards to the New York Rangers has been massive this year. They've got guys like Artem Anisimov and just a lot of fantastic forwards. But when you look at how the team is built, do they have the grit to compete in the playoffs? Do they have those guys? They certainly have Brandon Dubinsky, and they have Mike Rupp and people like that. But do they have the grit to match up with, say, a team like the Boston Bruins or a team like the Penguins, who perhaps don't even really need to make a trade deadline move to beat the Rangers in a 7-game series? As it is now, I could conceivably see the Pens defeating the Rangers in a 7-game series simply because the playoffs are a different game. Guys like Marian Gaborik, guys like Brad Richards are going to be neutralized in the playoffs by some of the checking lines of the more physical teams, like, say, the Boston Bruins. And that's why, to me, as Jason said, the jury is still out a little bit on the Rangers, because while they have accrued such an impressive record and while they lead the Eastern Conference, it's one thing to do it in the regular season, an entirely different thing to do it in the playoffs. And certainly I think that a big part of the Rangers' success has come from their goaltending. Certainly we know that Henrik Lundqvist is a contender for the Hart Trophy, one of the only goalies in recent years to kind of have that distinction. And certainly, for me, I just think that the Rangers perhaps are going to need to prove a little something down the stretch, maybe show a little more of their physical game, kind of give a playoff preview as far as style goes, to maybe prove to some people that they're going to be able to compete with some of the more physical teams in the playoffs. And certainly still a lot of work to be done down the stretch for the Penguins if they want to have a chance to get that home ice advantage and win the division. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the backup goalie situation in the Steel City. Don't go anywhere. Stick around. We've got the rest of the show for you coming up. Welcome back. For the Pittsburgh Penguins this year, the struggles in net behind Marc-Andre Fleury have certainly been one of the key ingredients to a few of the losses. Brent Johnson has just, for lack of a better word, he's really, really struggled to produce wins this year. And it's a bit of a puzzle because he certainly was so great last year, kind of a brick wall in net last year with a great save percentage, and really was one who could come in and relieve Marc-Andre Fleury almost any time. This year we're seeing a completely different Brent Johnson. Luke, do you think that the Penguins might go out and look for somebody come the trade deadline to relieve some of Marc-Andre Fleury's starts down the stretch, or do you think perhaps we'll give Thiessen that chance, or do you think we'll just stick with Johnson?
Well, Johnson's making it tough right now. I think it might have been a mistake not trying to get him more starts earlier, and maybe trying to avoid this situation at this point. But they did call up Thiessen on emergency recall. He might need to be sent down before the weekend, these 2 games coming up. But they said going into the season that they wanted to get Thiessen some NHL time. They really haven't done that so far. But you look at his numbers in the minors, and they really haven't justified giving him that chance so far. His numbers are down from last year, albeit he had a great year last year. But he's really struggled in some games this year. So I don't think they want to have to go out and get a backup at this point. Hopefully they can squeeze in some starts for Thiessen here to maybe give Fleury a few nights off, and B, just see what they have in Thiessen. He is coming. This is his contract year, so they're going to have to make some decisions on him as well. So in the event that they do get Thiessen some time and he doesn't prove that he's capable, they might need to go out and make a move.
Yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury, I mean, he's certainly played amazing this year, and I think that was maybe part of the problem, in wanting to give Johnson maybe a little bit more work. But the times that Johnson's gone in, I'm not sure how many times he's been pulled this year. It's been a few. Fleury's scheduled night off turns into relief duty, and he's on pace right now to play in 69 games this year, and that's obviously with a couple relief appearances. And I just that's too many games for your starting goalie, especially down the stretch. He's physically close to his peak, where it shouldn't take too much of a toll on him. He's probably the most athletic and one of the quickest goalies in the league, if not the quickest. I think his body can take the pounding, but to do that and then to roll right into the Stanley Cup playoffs, I think if the Pens are hoping for a deep run, they might want to look at making a change here. And a little curious about Johnson's illness today. I know he's missed a couple of practices, and I think he didn't dress for one game earlier this year because of illness. But the Pens have a couple of days off here, and I don't know if this is bringing Thiessen up, and is this a sign that Sherrill might be willing to do something? The other thing I think you have to look at is in March, it's an absolutely brutal schedule. The Pens play 15 games in 31 days. There's 3 sets of back-to-back games, and it's basically every other day. And I don't know what starts you want to give Fleury there. The Pens have a back-to-back situation this weekend. A name I'm going to throw out there. It's a kind of a curious name, I think, that is John Sebastian Jaguar. He's scheduled. He's a free agent at the end of the year for Colorado. He's a Conn Smythe winner, a Cup winner, and I don't know. I think I think he'd jump at the chance to play in front of a team like the Penguins right now toward the end of his career, and might be one of the guys that you could look at. Because otherwise there aren't too many names. Todd Coughlin gets waived. It doesn't clears waivers and gets sent to the AHL, and he's not the answer right now. Anyway, he's having a tough year. Kind of like Brett Johnson, but there aren't too many names out there. But if Sherrill's not happy, we know he's going to make a move. It's that simple.
And because Johnson was so good last year, I mean, he was spectacular in the way that he relieved Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury on pace for 70, maybe 70 plus games this season if he was to continue going the way he's going. And statistically, in the past, goaltenders who have played that much during the regular season do not do very well in the playoffs. Being that Johnson was as good as he was last year, Jason, what changes have you seen in his game? Why is he struggling so much? What has changed for Brent Johnson?
It's been really hard for me to kind of nail down Casey. I think his numbers have completely reversal, and you try to look at maybe the Pens' injuries problems and the defense that's in front of them, but we're having more injury problems this year than we had last year. Or you're in the same boat, and I don't know if it's a different style. The Pens were trying to grind out wins toward the end of the year, and they knew they had to go win 1-0 or 2-1 games to get by. If it's a different mentality, but I don't know. Johnson just looks a little bit more brittle this year. He's not going down, and that kind of comes with age, into the not sort of butterfly, but it's he just looks a little awkward, and maybe that's just Father Time catching up with him. But it's tough to be a backup. You never know when you're going to play, but you always have to be prepared to play. I just think maybe it's just his time in the NHL might be done.
Yeah, I think awkward is a good way of putting it. You look at the starts he's gotten off to in some of these games that he's gotten into, and he's just letting up some of these. He's off his angle, and he's just letting up some real softies. And while he is getting older, and his reaction times might not be completely there as they used to be anyway, you can tell that he's just. I don't know if it's focus. I don't know if it's maybe he's realizing he's kind of in the later years of his playing days. But it's almost in his head. I don't think it's completely due to his age. I just think he's And it's strange because we look back to last season and he was in there for so many games where he wouldn't play for long stretches and then he'd come in and be lights out. But they tried to kind of use him in that same role this year, and it just hasn't happened. And it's really bizarre because I think everybody expected him to be that way, but Fleury got off to that great start, and they didn't really have much of a need for Brent Johnson. And I guess there were cons to Marc-Andre Fleury's great season so far. But Johnson's making it really tough to get him starts and not want to bring in someone else at this point.
And, you can kind of see it in the way that he plays. It definitely appears to be more psychological. For instance, the goal in Buffalo, the very first goal that was scored that day, very simple. Yes, there was a defensive breakdown, but at the same time, the job of your goaltender is to make up for defensive breakdowns. That's why there's a goaltender in the net. Well, the first goal sort of shot off the side of the net. I believe it was Derek Roy. Kind of an easy shot to save. All he really had to do was get his pad down slightly to the left, and it sort of just seems to be indicative of the way things are going for him this season, that he wasn't able to get it there quick enough, and the puck just kind of flipped over his pad. And then you see it again if you go back a little bit to the Tampa Bay game, in which he let in, I believe, 2 goals on the first 3 shots, and it's like you see the way that he's standing and his positioning and his angles, and it almost just, none of it looks right. It looks awkward. I mean, awkward was the word that you guys both used, and extremely accurate. He looks awkward, and it looks almost like he's a deer in the headlights. It just looks like he's rattled even before the game begins. And, whether that's something that, maybe he is starting to realize he's in the later stages of his career. Perhaps it's really not psychological, and perhaps he's just, getting slower. But in any case, Brent Johnson has certainly, I think, lost a lot of not the respect or anything of his teammates, but trust as far as being able to put him in net to relieve Marc-Andre Fleury and still have a chance to win hockey games. All right, folks, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about who could possibly win the division and playoff matchups. Stay tuned. Welcome back. With the victory tonight, the Pittsburgh Penguins are 8 points separated from the Eastern Conference leading New York Rangers. It is going to be a tight one coming down the stretch here. The New York certainly put the heat on early in the year, really had a spectacular record, and it's going to make it tough for anyone to touch them. But really, if they start to struggle, perhaps the Penguins or any Eastern Conference team really could cut off the slack here. For the Penguins, matchup-wise, certainly they're trying to get home ice. And for listeners, I get this question every single year. What is the big difference between home ice and non-home ice? Luke, we'll start with you here. For those who may not know, what is the difference between having home ice? What's the real advantages of having home ice?
It's a psychological thing sometimes. I think the Penguins are at that point where maybe it might not matter as much to them, just because they've been on both sides of it. You look at their run in 2008, where they were pretty much on the road the entire time and really being able to claw their way up, whereas 2009, when they did win the Cup, they did have home ice for a lot of that. I think some of the younger teams maybe, and it's strange to say because the Penguins really are a younger team, but they have that experience in the playoffs that it's tough to really consider them the rookies of the postseason, I guess. So I think a team like the Florida Panthers, for instance, or even the New York Rangers, because we haven't seen this particular set of Rangers together in the playoffs for a long stretch. You don't know how they're necessarily going to react to a whole lot of situations. And the Penguins, I feel kind of comfortable no matter what seed with. But some of these other teams, there can be some head games with the crowd, just general stupid things like luck. We've seen a lot of hockey players and their weird superstitions, our captain being one of them. But there's an intense mental aspect to the game of hockey, and home ice can definitely play a huge part in that.
I think if you asked Dan Bilesma if he could have home ice advantage, he'd probably start to drool because I think, not only do you get to sleep in your own bed and wake up and just go to the rink rather than be on the road and they, have to exit the hotel at 3 in the morning because of a pulled fire alarm or whatever kind of shenanigans. But, home ice gets the last change. And, in the regular season, I don't think it matters as much. I think sometimes coaches can, outcoach themselves with matchups, but, in the playoffs, that's when it really comes into focus. You notice like when we played the Red Wings in the finals that, Mike Babcock would try to get, either Pavel Datsyuk or Henrik Zetterberg on the ice every time Sidney Crosby was out there, or we'd get our shutdown pairing of Hal Gill and Rob Scuderi out every time Ovechkin was on the ice versus the Caps. So it is a big advantage, especially when you have a face-off in your own zone late in the game and you want to get your defensive center out there. But for the most part, I think it might be a little bit overrated. It's nice to have home ice advantage, but if you look at some of the stats of the past couple of years, in the last 2 seasons, the Pens have lost a Game 7 on home ice, or they're 0-2 in the last Game 7s on home ice. And you look back at the Cup run of 2009, and the Pens were 2-0 in Game 7s on the road in Washington and Detroit. So I think the best teams in the playoffs are definitely good road teams. I don't think it's that big of a factor because, your teams are always ready to play. If you have a bad game, it's easy to come back and refocus and do what you need to do to take care of business. Otherwise, you're going to be on the golf course before you know it. But, just to re-echo a little bit what Luke said earlier, I think it actually might be, good for the Pens to, if they don't end up with home ice, it's not the end of the world. I would probably relish a chance of playing the Jets or the Caps or Florida as a 6 versus a 3 seed. I mean, you have those teams who, with Florida and Winnipeg, I think would be a little bit shell shocked to come in the playoffs. Maybe not used to it, where the Pens have a lot of veterans who have been to the playoff battles and kind of know what it takes. So. I'd definitely rather to have that situation right now than face a New Jersey who's given the Pens a tough time this year.
And certainly, a question that comes to mind is the pressure on the Penguins this year. They've lost 2 straight series in the first round. Tampa Bay last year, Montreal the year before. Certainly, that was an upset to the Penguins, who were Stanley Cup champions the year prior. 2 straight losses in the first round. Now, of course, last year we were without Sidney Crosby. We were without Evgeny Malkin. We were without Matt Cook even serving the suspension. But how much pressure do you think the Pittsburgh Penguins feel this year to at least try to get out of the first round, to maybe just move on? And, once you're really out of the first round, it's really anyone's game because there's fewer and fewer teams. But, Jason, we'll begin with you here. How much pressure do you think that not only that the fans are putting on, but how much do you think that the Penguins feel from the fans to get out of the first round this year?
I think they definitely feel it to a degree. They know how close they were last year, losing a 1-goal game at home. It leaves a bitter taste in your mouth throughout the year. And when they step on the ice for Game 1 of the playoffs this year, that's going to be in their mind for the ones that were here. But I think for a lot of new guys this year. Sullivan, I think will bring a different aspect of that. He's got playoff experience, but. Just being healthy. I think having, 2, top 6 centermen in Stahl and Malkin, I think is the world of difference because we've seen Jordan Stahl really come into his own you say this year, but I've seen him in the last few games, and he's looking for a shot. He's moving the puck, dangling in the offensive zone, and really underrated, I think, in my view. I think, the Pens know that, if they can put it together and just be a little bit more consistent, that they have a legitimate shot. And their goaltender is capable of stealing games, so, why not them?
I would agree in a sense that there definitely is a pressure. I don't know that it's necessarily due to how the past few years have gone. I think it's more of the talent that this team has. They know what their capabilities are. They know how much faith they have in their coaching staff. You look at last season's team, I don't think anybody expected them to do that well in the regular season out everyone. If you would have told me that their first round series would have gone 7 games and they would have lost, I'm sure everyone would have been disappointed. But without Crosby, without Malkin, with Jordan Staal getting injured, with the whole Matt Cook fiasco, I don't know how much pressure there really was when you don't have the core of your lineup there. I look at this season's team and the capabilities that they have, the level that Yevgeny Malkin is playing at, the level Marc-Andre Fleury is playing at, how Jordan Staal and Chris Letang are playing, how James Neal has risen from the ashes of his 1-goal season, or his 1-goal stint with the Penguins last year. And they know what they're capable of. I don't think they're dwelling on the past. I don't think they have reason to dwell on the past. Even without Sidney Crosby, this team can win multiple playoff series. So I don't think the pressure's there, and how it's really tough to say how they can really look at past seasons with the overhaul and everything. But there is a pressure there, and they're definitely capable of living up to it.
All right, let's talk a little bit about matchups. We'll begin with you, Luke. Who is your favorite matchup for the Pittsburgh Penguins come playoff time? You could even pick someone who's not currently in the playoff picture, if you think that they'll make their way into the playoff picture. But give us your favorite, and then give us your least favorite.
That's a tough one. I think, my favorite would obviously be winning the 1 seed and facing whoever that number 8 seed is, which could seemingly be half a dozen teams. I almost want to say the same matchup for my favorite and least favorite, because I really love playing the Flyers in the playoffs. Certainly an incredibly brutal matchup, physicality-wise. The pace of that game is absolutely unreal. Just the built-in storylines there with Jaromir Jagr and Max Talbot on their team, the interstate rivalry. Part of me loves that, but part of me looks and says, that's a really tough matchup. They have scoring, they have grit, they have everything but the goaltending. And year in, year out, that seems to be the thing with the Philadelphia Flyers. They're probably not even be sure who they're going to go with in that series in net. So I turn away a little bit because I'm afraid that maybe you're not able to escape that series without an injury or two. But it's the playoffs. You're not going to be able to avoid that. But just with everything built into that, I think that makes for really great storytelling, and I would love to see a Flyers-Penguins matchup.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong there, especially with the Flyers having their goaltending issues, and also Fleury being so solid this year. I would really like to stick it to the Caps this year. I just think if they can win their division, I just see it as a favorable matchup for the Pens. I think Evgeny Malkin would love to show Alex Ovechkin in a 7-game series with or without Crosby that who the top Russian player would be and who the best in the game is. And they have their goaltending problems too. So they've had a lot of injuries. I just think they're a little bit right for the picking, and it kind of goes back to my thing about playing whoever the Southeast Division winner is. That would probably be my most favorable matchup for the Pens. The team I really want no part of is the New Jersey Devils. For some reason, the last couple of years, it just seems like they've had the Pens' number, and they get a 1 or 2 goal lead, and they just seem to zap the life out of a game and clamp down defensively. And the Pens haven't really been able to come from behind against the Devils. It's been pretty tough. So especially going against Marty Brodeur in a 7-game series. I know he's playing pretty well right now, so that's the matchup I would probably not want right now.
And one of those things is that Marty Brodeur, even, at his age now, he still has that fire and that passion. And you could argue that he's maybe the best goaltender of all time. Statistics, I think, would probably tell you that he is. Of course, there's arguments against, too. You got guys like Hasek and Waugh that have just been fantastic. But, he still has that fire, still has that passion for the game. And in a playoff series, especially with the way that the New Jersey Devils play defense with their trap style, it would be tough to come from behind against New Jersey. And as far as the Capitals go, I think Evgeny Malkin maybe has the Capitals second thinking who they took in that draft with that first overall pick. And maybe perhaps just a little bit after this year and after last season with Ovechkin's lack of production compared to his usual production, maybe they're thinking, Malkin might have been the right choice back in that draft. But certainly the Penguins have some matchups that a lot of fans want to see. The Flyers, definitely one of them, always a great series when the Pens play the Flyers. And I know from myself and from a lot of the standpoint of Pens fans, we would just love to stick it to Jaromir Jagr, perhaps Game 7 overtime win, and then whoever scores the goal gives the salute. That would just be the ultimate for the Penguins. That would be just so fantastic to see. But we're going to talk about game predictions coming up. Stay tuned. Welcome back. On Saturday, the Pittsburgh Penguins will once again participate in a matinee game once again against the Tampa Bay Lightning. The last time they had a weekend matinee game against the Lightning, Evgeny Malkin took over and scored a natural hat trick in the third period to win it for the Pens. Jason, we'll begin with you here. What do you see this time going into this matchup? Marc-Andre Fleury likely to start since it's a 3-day layoff. Do you think that we will once again be able to defeat the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Short answer is yes. I just want to say, let's try this again. The Penguins have back-to-back afternoon games for the second weekend in a row, and maybe they'll get a different result, getting all 4 points, being at home. I don't know if they left too much on the ice and overlooked Buffalo last weekend, but the past is the past, and we'll deal with that. But Tampa's argument is hoarding draft picks. So goodbye Dominic Moore. Pablo Cabina, Daniel Cavier was out tonight with an injury. I don't know how long he's going to be out. I see the Pens with a chance to bank some points, and the same goes for getting Malkin. One of the things tonight, I was hoping that he was going to get a point on either him or someone else getting an empty net goal, and it didn't happen. But these are 2 games this weekend. I think Malkin can really put some points in the bank. I see the Pens winning pretty big, probably by 3.
I could easily see that as well. With the Tampa Bay fire sale seemingly underway, with the uncertainty in net for them, the instability really, I just can't see the Penguins not winning this game handily. And really the way the Penguins have played against Tampa this season, they've played pretty well. Really kept Steven Stamkos under wraps somewhat. So I think they'll win this, and I'll go and say 5-1 Penguins victory. I think they could put 4 goals up on them.
And hey, by the way, one of the things that I've wondered this year, what is up with all the matinee games on the weekends? I mean, certainly good to watch a game in the daytime, but I don't know why. It seems like the Penguins have more matinee games this year than maybe any other team I've ever seen. I guess the league, the matchmakers certainly just love to see the Pens early in the day. And once again on Sunday, a 1 p.m. game, Eastern Time, the Pittsburgh Penguins and the worst team in the league, the Columbus Blue Jackets, certainly with the worst record. Perhaps looking to, by that point, maybe they will have given away Rick Nash. Who knows? The sweepstakes is on with a bunch of teams. Luke, we'll begin with you this time. What do you see happening in this game?
Yeah, the day before the trading deadline with the uncertainty around Rick Nash and Jeff Carter, the Columbus Blue Jackets are not a good team at all. That there really isn't any aspect of their game that is good. you just look at them. Steve Mason had that great rookie year, and even as inconsistent as it was at the time, has really never put it back together. The Blue Jackets, I just don't see them having the net presence. I don't see them having the offense to really go toe-to-toe with the Penguins, and this might honestly be a bigger difference in score than the Lightning game that we predicted. So I'll say Penguins big. I won't say how much because I don't want to sound too pompous.
Yeah, I definitely think it's more of the same from the Lightning game. You have to look at from a Columbus perspective. I mean, you've had a horrible year at this point in the season, 3/4 of the way through. You know, if you get down by a goal or two, I mean, what do you know? There's always pride, of course, but I mean, you're not playing for anything, and the organization is probably looking to ship out anyone who could garner back a draft pick or another asset to kind of rebuild for the future. So probably a lot of question marks in that room, and like we said, will this be Rick Nash or Jeff Carter or James Wisniewski's last game in a Blue Jackets uniform? Who knows? I know they said that former Penn GM Craig Patrick, who's working for the Blue Jackets now, was at the game tonight scouting. So yeah, who knows? But I like the Penguins big, and hopefully this is a game, if possible, that on back-to-backs that Brent Johnson could gain some confidence and turn it around.
And I'm sure that Evgeny Malkin and James Neal are just salivating, thinking about that Columbus game Sunday. Perhaps a stat-fattening game, and maybe Evgeny Malkin can, widen that gap a little bit between him and Claude Giroux for the points race. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for our show tonight. We thank you all so much for tuning in. Luke, pleasure to have you on the show as always. Thank you so much. And we'll see you in 2 weeks after our programming break.
All right. Sounds good.
Jason, always a pleasure to have you on the show as well. Thanks so much for coming by tonight, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks.
Sounds great. Hopefully we'll see what Trader Ray has to do. He's always surprised me at the deadline, but this year he might surprise us all and do nothing. So we'll, I'm sure, have some stuff to talk about.
And by the way, everybody, on the trade deadline day, don't forget to check out PensIcebergRadio.com. We will have all your trade deadline updates for the Penguins if they decide to do anything, and also leading up to the trade deadline, the couple days leading up to, we will have all your Pittsburgh Penguins coverage. All right, folks, from all of us here at the Pens Iceberg, have a great night and a great week.